Okay guys, first thing I want to talk about this morning is building a virtual machine in VirtualBox. So what is a virtual machine? Virtual machine is just as it sounds. It is a machine that lives only with ones and zeros. So your normal computer has a motherboard, hard drive, RAM, CPU, all the other things about it that make it a very powerful calculator. Virtual machine lives on another physical machine. We use them for testing a lot. Like say for example, we have a Debian host machine. That'll be your physical environment. You can build a virtual machine of Windows 7 or Red Hat or whatever you want really to test with or just to use on a daily basis. I know a lot of Linux people, if they run Linux on their main desktop or laptop, they can run Windows in a virtual machine to allow them to run some software they want to run that's only available in Windows, or some that they like better with the Windows version. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a virtual machine using VirtualBox. VirtualBox is very user friendly. So this is just the first virtual machine manager we're going to learn how to use. I want to use make videos with Proxmox, VMware, and a few others. So one of the first things we want to do is you want to hit New, open up VirtualBox Virtual Machine Manager, and if you don't already have the extension pack installed, make sure that you go and install the extension pack. So open up a browser, go to virtualbox.org and go to downloads. VirtualBox 6.12.2 platform packages. This is for Windows hosts. This is a Windows machine. I could download that. Of course, I've already got it installed, but I'm going to cancel that and just run through the install process like normal. You also want to install the VirtualBox extension pack. The extension pack gives you shared clipboard, things like that. It allows for USB 3.0 devices, VirtualBox remote desktop recall, disk encryption, and it makes the overall experience with VirtualBox better. Of course, I already have all that stuff installed, so I really don't need to download it again. So let's create new, and what we're going to create this morning. Let's do a Linux Mint. I don't have any Linux Mint on here. So Linux Mint is actually based on Ubuntu. Ubuntu is based on Debian. I use the Debian repositories for a lot of their packages. Let's hit next. I'm going to give it 2 gigs of RAM. I think I have a little over 16 gigs total in here, or exactly 16 gigs. Next, we're going to create a virtual hard disk. We don't always have to create a hard disk. If we already have one and we're wanting to build a machine that already has a hard disk attached to it, we can go through that process and do not add a virtual hard disk at this time or use an existing virtual hard disk. If you didn't want to add a virtual hard disk, you could boot into what's called a live environment. Live environment is where, like with a normal computer, whenever you boot the machine, it copies the operating system or the parts of the operating system that it needs off of the hard drive and copies it into RAM. Everything you see running on the machine, everything on this screen right here, lives in RAM. With a live environment, you do that from usually a DVD or CD. In this instance, it's going to be an ISO or an image of a DVD. Or you could use an existing hard drive. If I already had one and I wanted to boot to an existing hard disk file, and you guys can see this is a file, it's a VDI, virtual disk image. I'm going to create a 10 gig drive now. I always like using the VirtualBox disk image because it's native. You can use VHD if you wanted to, virtual hard disk. Those are more commonly seen in Windows environments than VMDK or virtual machine disk. Those are more commonly seen with VMware. So next, we're going to do dynamically allocated. Dynamically allocated means that if you build a 50 gig virtual disk and you make it a fixed size, then your 50 gig virtual disk is always going to be exactly 50 gigs. Whenever you make it dynamically allocated, if you build a 50 gig drive, but you only install 7 gigs worth of data, then your virtual disk is only going to be 7 gigs or just a little larger. It's not going to take up 50 gigs on your hard drive or on your host machine's hard drive. And it will grow as it needs to. I like dynamically allocated. So we show 10 gigs, Linux Mint, VDI, my name is John, so it's in my folder, VirtualBox VMs. Hit create. So now I have a Linux Mint machine. Go into settings, system. I want to take the floppy out and drop it down. This is the boot order from top to bottom. So if I put the hard disk up here and try to start the machine up, it would try to boot from the hard disk. The hard disk is empty. It doesn't have an operating system on it. So I have to move the optical disk up, and I'm going to drop an ISO of Linux Mint inside that optical disk. So I'm going to go to processor. I'm going to go ahead and give it 4 processors. It doesn't need just a whole lot, but I have a few to spare. So go display. I'll give it a little bit more video memory. Let's go half. A fairly decent video card in here. Go to storage. This is where we go to controller IDE. You could change this out, put in another SATA controller, or just add another add a disk image file to the SATA controller. IDE, a little bit backwards compatible with a lot of the Linux versions that are out there. Of course, you don't really need IDE anymore, but like I say, it's all virtualized. This isn't actually an IDE controller. It's a virtualized IDE controller. You could do pass-through and use the host machine's drive. So if you had a physical disk for Linux Mint or whatever it was you were trying to install, you could do that and just do a pass-through from the physical machine's drive. We're going to use a image file, choose a disk file. There we go. It's a fairly old one, not too old though. Linux Mint. This lives on solid state. The ISO lives on solid state, so it should run pretty quick as far as the installation process goes. I want to enable audio, enable network. Now this is NAT, network address translation. We are actually building this machine, and it will run through VirtualBox built-in router, and it will NAT out to my host machine's network down here. You could bridge this out. You could create an internal network. Whenever we go through and create pfSense virtual machine in the future, I'll show you guys how to add more adapters and how to create the internal network. But for now, we're just going to do NAT, and it will get an IP address automatically from VirtualBox's internal router. So right now, we only have the one adapter. Only need one. There's no serial ports. USB 2.0 is fine for now. May add 3.0 later. Said OK. So like I say, virtual machine is a machine that lives only on a host machine. There are virtual machine servers. This is what's called a Type 2 hypervisor. It is built on top of another operating system. Of course, VirtualBox manager. We'll get into Type 1 hypervisors later. So start. Select startup disk. I thought I'd already done that. Linux Mint. Start. So, monster drink first thing in the morning. so we are running in software rendering mode. There's a problem with the drivers being able to access the virtual video card. It's not a big deal. So we can go through the installation process for Linux Mint. This is, like I've talked about before, this is what's called a live environment. So live environment lives only in RAM at this point. We haven't actually installed anything yet, so even though we have a virtual hard disk and virtual DVD that we're installing from, nothing has actually been installed yet. So we're still running from that ISO file. This only lives in RAM. So you have all the different things that you would normally have inside the operating system, so you can try it out. So we're going to go through now and do the installation process. So go install Linux Mint. English is my only language. If you try to communicate with me in any other language, we won't be able to communicate. So continue. English US keyboard layout. Of course, if you spoke another language, you can go through and change your keyboard layout to whatever layout you need. Look at this. We run into our first problem. This computer only has only 10.7 gigabytes, and it will not let me continue. So here I am in a situation where I've created a really small disk. 10 gigs is really small, and I will not be able to install to it because it needs more hard drive space. So I'm gonna, you really want to quit the installation now? I guess I do. I'm gonna quit. And this is a little bit advanced for someone new, but I'm going to show you how to create a new virtual machine disk and remove the old one. Alright, so I'm going to pretend that I've moved the disk in the drive, hit enter, and let this thing shut down. So let's go into settings, because the disk I created was too small. And go to storage. I have a Linux Mint BDI. So it's adding a new controller. I'm going to go here. I'm going to add a new hard disk. So I'm going to add a hard disk, and you see all the other disks I have here. I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to create it in this folder. The file name is going to be Linux. We'll do an underscore here. Linux Mint .bdi. That's my problem. I hit add instead of create. So let's create VirtualBox disk image. Dynamically allocated. I'm going to bump this up to 16. Should be plenty of space for it. Then we can actually delete the other one whenever we get this one created. So create. So that one's going to be attached. Choose. I can actually delete the other one. So now we only have the one 16 gig dynamically allocated VDI, and our controller is still showing empty. Let's go back and choose that. So now we have Linux Mint. It's attached to optical drive. You don't have to check live CD DVD. You can. It'll still boot to it. All right, so start again. First video I'm making for you guys. I'm already making mistakes. That's IT. Problem solving. And I promise I'm not sponsored by Monster. I just have a caffeine addiction. And it's early. So same situation we came with before. We have the same live environment. Now we're online. We have a network connection, wired connection 1. We have an IP address. So you see our IP address is 10.0.2.15. If I'm not mistaken, that's the exact same IP address VirtualBox hands out to every virtual machine. We can get online if we wanted to. Like I say, live environment, everything lives in RAM. And whatever any changes you make in a live environment don't stick around. They disappear whenever you shut the machine down. And we use live environments for all kinds of things. We use them for virus removal, scanning hard drives for errors, recovering data, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, let's go through the install process. Install Linux Mint. Let's go to English, continue, US English, and I want to install the third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and all that kind of stuff. And so what they're telling you is this software is subject to license terms, included with its documentation. Some is proprietary. If I was a Linux purist, I would not install any proprietary software in my operating system, but it makes it work better. So if I can get the proprietary drivers, the majority of the time the proprietary drivers work better. Now, some instances they don't, but I found that a lot of times they do. So we're going to go ahead and install all those. Continue. So this will delete all your programs, documents, photos, music. It's an empty virtual disk, so it's not going to erase anything. Hit install now. If you continue, the changes will be written to disk. That's what I'm wanting. Now, if I was installing this on a regular computer, and I had, say, for example, Windows or Debian or Arch or whatever other operating system installed, I would need to partition the drive, then install Linux Mint in the unallocated space. But since this is a virtual machine, we don't have to worry about that. So we are Central Time here, Chicago. My name's John, and you can name the computer, pretty much whatever you want. Choose password. I do not want to log in automatically, and I'm not going to worry about encrypting my home folder right now. Probably going to delete this as soon as I get it installed, but just for education purposes. And then we're starting the installation process. So we're just about done. It should install fairly quickly. And of course, with VirtualBox, you can run several different machines, pretty much with any virtual machine manager. If you have enough resources, hard drive, CPU, RAM, you can run several different machines at one time. Installed that one yesterday. I have another Red Hat here. I haven't run OpenSUSE in a while. I believe this is Tumbleweed. I'm not really sure. It's been a while since I've run this. 3 gigs of RAM. I'll boot this one up. But what I wanted to show you is that you can run several different virtual machines at the same time. This one's going to switch to full screen. So and it is Tumbleweed. So one of the things I need to tell you guys about is that the host key in VirtualBox is the right control, so right hand. And if I want to take this out of full screen, I can hit right control, and F, and that will bring it back down at a full screen. It's been so long since I've run this, I'm not really sure what the password is, but we will try something. That was it. All right. I like OpenSUSE quite a bit. I run Arch most of the time on my laptops, or Manjaro, because I like it really lightweight, and I can choose what I want to have installed. So I don't. So if you look at Linux Mint, for example, it's going through and installing all these different things in the background for you. There's not just a whole lot of choice on what you have installed. The machine installs the base operating system. The base operating system comes with whatever packages the maintainers decided they wanted to install. And the one thing about Arch that I like probably the most is that it doesn't use just a whole lot of RAM. And the reason being is because you only, the only thing running on the machine are the things that you've installed on it. So there's nothing running in the background. You can kind of wonder, what is this process? Because everything that's running is something that you've installed. So it doesn't have a page top. Let's see how much this one's using. So we're using 696 megabytes of RAM. We have 1,206 new updates, but it apparently has been a while since I've run this machine. I'll close the current tab, and I can go through the update process. Let's see how long it's been. I'm not really going to work with it right now. But anyway, the main thing I wanted to show you is that you can run multiple virtual machines at the same time. So whenever we go through and we're practicing setting up virtual routers and getting all of our settings and stuff done for those virtual routers, you can run, like say, pfSense or OpenSense or Untangle or pretty much whatever small Linux-based or BSD-based firewall you want to run, or router, and run your virtual machines actually through that that routing interface and creating your internal networks. But we don't need to do that right now. And this is taking a little bit longer than what I thought it would. Well, that's fine. So you see, we're installing LibreOffice, the writer, calculator, compress, draw, and base. It's good. Have an Office suite. It's 30,000 free applications from the software manager. And of course, you can install Wine and run Windows software, or install VirtualBox and run Windows itself within Linux Mint. So that's kind of what we're doing here, except we're in Windows. You can go through, and you can. The one thing that I love the most, one of the things I love the most about Linux is that the operating system is completely customizable. So Linux is just the kernel itself. The desktop environment is just something that's added to the kernel, built on top of it. So you can do a lot of customization. If you're good with coding, you can create your own software or modify the software that is built into the operating system. And since this is a live environment, you guys kind of get an idea of what's going to be installed whenever the machine finishes. I think we're done now. So installation is finished. You can continue testing Linux Mint now, but until you restart the computer, any changes you make or documents you save will not be preserved. This is a live environment. So we're going to restart now. And I think VirtualBox has this fixed now, but for years you had to take the CD DVD out of the boot order, or it would just boot back into the disk every time. So this one did not. They actually fixed that. It's pretty neat. So it shows John VirtualBox. This is written to disk now, so anything that I create in here, or anything I save, will stay inside the virtual machine. So I can shut down from here. I can log in from here. When I quit, shut down the machine, and go through a clean boot with you. I'm actually going to go through and take the ISO out of. Well, I already emptied it out. Good. I was going to go through and take the ISO out. That way, if I moved it or upgraded the ISO to the latest version of Linux Mint, I wouldn't get an error the next time I started this machine up. So I go to Linux Mint, hit start, and it boots up. We can go through and install guest editions. It's one of the things I always tell my students: if guest editions aren't installed, you're not done with your test yet. So this is one of our skills tests in the class. They have to go through and install a virtual machine. One of the reasons I'm creating this video series is for my students. So yeah, Cinnamon just crashed. I'm running in fallback mode, running in software rendering mode. Really not that big of a deal, guys. Like I say, this isn't a real machine; it's a virtual machine. So some of the drivers don't work the way they're supposed to. So that happens. So we're going to insert the guest edition CD. Guest editions allows us to, like I had on earlier with OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, it allows us to go through and go full screen. We can do what's called a shared clipboard, where I can copy from my host machine and paste it into my guest machine, things like that. It makes the user experience much better. So this medium contains software intended to be automatically started. Would you like to run it? Yes, I would. So put in my password. And once we get guest editions installed, we can reboot, and then we can have a full screen immersive experience with VirtualBox. All right, so let's restart. And you don't have to keep this open in the background. You can close it out. Let me see. I was wanting to show you. I think I got to create a shortcut inside VirtualBox Manager. So anyway, let's go ahead and log in. Welcome to Linux Mint. So let's choose. I held down the control key, the right control key, and hit F. That gives me full screen. So now I can switch to full screen mode and have a full screen immersive window, which it makes the user experience better for me, because everything's not windowed. So I have a 20 or 32 inch monitor. So this allows me to have a full screen immersive experience and be able to use the operating system the way it was meant to be. Now, this doesn't have a really powerful processor, doesn't have just a whole lot of RAM. We only have 2 gigs in it. I like each top better than top. Really just wanted to show you how much RAM we're using in this. So we gave it 2 gigs. I have 16 total. One of the reasons I want to see how much RAM it's using, I want to see how efficient the operating system is. So it shows here we're using 610 megabytes. I know my Windows 10 machine that I'm hosting this with now, it uses significantly more. Not even really running anything. I can have 0 programs open and I'm still using over 2 gigs of RAM. Linux is a little bit more efficient than Windows in that aspect. And you see my 4 cores here, 4 virtual cores. Alright, so that's all I've got for you guys today. That's installing a virtual machine in VirtualBox. I think the next one will probably be Proxmox. So we'll go ahead and shut this down. Take it out of full screen mode. And that's all.